This session essentially does three things and a sort of supplementary fourth thing. I'm just clicking the slide forward. As Grzegorz mentioned, I'm one of the authors of the Language Hub series. I'll be illustrating, looking at one or two, a few example activities from Language Hub. So one of the things that you'll hopefully get is a sort of little taste of some of the things inside the book. Okay, but let's move on and look at the key three things pertaining to sort of your teacher training or our teacher training methodology and so on and so on. I'm going to be looking at, briefly, some speaking activities to activate opinions. Okay, then we'll move on and look at what I'm calling traditional ELT opinions language. The language which is very valid, it exists, it's very real, but I think it's what we, would be familiar to us if we open up a unit in a book or a section in a book that's looking at the language of opinions. Then I'd like to move on from that and look at what I'm calling the real language of opinions. As I said, I'm not saying that the other language is not real, but what we look at are the sort of simple little techniques that we probably more frequently use in the real world than the more traditional language. So hopefully that will all make sense. The language we're looking at will be very familiar to you. It's very simple. And towards the end, we'll look at some pretty simple, straightforward activities that, should you want to, you can introduce this kind of language into the classroom. Okay, so I hope that set the scene. I'm going to move on and ask you a question. What kind of opinion speaking tasks are there? So maybe you'd like to pop in the chat box the kinds of activities that you might do in the classroom which can activate students giving of opinion, agreeing, disagreeing, debates, sure, role play, likes, negotiating, sure, brainstorming, discussions, yep, role play, balloon debate, yep, okay, everyday life, I guess that activates opinion, sure, mind mapping, okay, excellent. Okay, well, I mean, I think that probably a lot of the activities that we do in the classroom require engagement with giving opinion, agreeing, disagreeing, and so on and so on. But there are some activities that we can do which are more overtly focused on the language of opinion. So what I'd like to do first is just look at a few of these examples. Okay, so here's one, give your opinion. This is a very overt. This is actually from Language Hub. This is from the A2 level. Okay, so it's quite simple, quite straightforward. Yes, sort of maybe low level or lower level thinking, do you like them? Yes, I do. No, I don't, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's move on. Look at another example. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, slightly little more processing needed maybe. Yes, because you're moving outwards from your personal opinion about something you like to making an assessment. So it's a slightly higher order thinking maybe. This activity again from A2 also I think we can see is practicing comparative adjectives. Okay, so it's combining the two language areas. Let's look at another example. Sorry, that's a bit slow. Do you agree with their opinions? This higher order thinking possibly. Yes, you're asking not to just give your opinion, but do you agree with other people? So there's a bit more depth to the opinion giving. The topic here, of course, is English as a lingua franca. 4 statements that we heard in a previous listening exercise, and then we're asking the students to engage with that. Do you agree or disagree with that? A very interesting topic, a very current topic in the world of ELT. Okay. And another one, in your opinion, what's the difference between sport and a game? Not such an easy question, actually. There's some, I think, on the fringes of these, pretty clear, but I think there's some in this little grey area in the middle. Okay. Do you agree with the speaker's arguments? Again, whoops, my hands were here and the slide moved. I don't know what happened there. Do you agree with the speaker's arguments? So again, even higher order thinking, possibly, you know, looking at the speaker's opinion, the speaker's position, the speaker's stance. Do you agree with that? Okay, which are strong and weak arguments. So you're actually assessing the strength of the speaker's argument. So what we've looked at there are some overt kind of activities directly asking for your opinion, your agreement, disagreement, from the more lower order, straightforward, to something a little more complex. And we could keep going up the chain, of course, and get into sort of much deeper, much higher order thinking. Okay, and someone at the beginning mentioned debates. This is not overtly directing you to speak about opinion, give your opinion, but the nature of having a debate will inevitably involve the giving of opinion, agreement and disagreement. Which is better, box sets or on demand, or traditional weekly TV shows? This is based on a reading, I think it's an internet debate, an internet thread, where people are giving their pros and cons of this. So it's scaffolded. The students have got some ideas before they have their debate. And here's another one. Decide on the best animal picture. Again, this is from Language Hub. The task here essentially is, imagine you are the judges in a wildlife photography competition. Choose the best picture. So the groups will have to share their opinions and agree, hopefully agree on the winner. So I've been speaking enough. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Which of these pictures do you think should be the winner? Which is your favorite? A, B, C, D, E, or F? F, the fish. B, F, A. Okay. So we've got a mix there, which is great. Because if you were doing this activity, if you were your students and you were in groups, you would initially have different opinions. So the act of discussing it, debating it, trying to persuade each other to see your point of view, would hopefully generate a lot of opinion language, a lot of agreement and a lot of disagreement. Okay, excellent. While I was putting this talk together, or in fact last year actually, when I was doing something, I came across the picture which is slowly opening on the top left. You may have seen that before. Has anybody seen that picture before? The two little mice in the underground station? This, I think, won about a year ago. I think this won some amateur wildlife photography competition. The question is, the big question is, in your opinion, are they fighting or dancing? Maybe you can just write fighting or dancing. What do you think? Fighting, dancing, fighting, dancing, dancing, fighting. Okay, we seem to have a mix, which is good. Okay, and while I was putting this talk together, I discovered there is another annual competition for the humorous comedy wildlife photograph of the year, and this was the overall winner for 220. And I learned a new bit of language. Terry the turtle flipping the bird. Now, I've never heard the phrase flipping the bird in my life, so I learned something new from researching this. So that was the overall winner of comedy or humorous wildlife photograph of the year. So just like I've put these pictures here, you can get your students, if we go back to the activity where they had to choose the winner of the wildlife photographs, you can get them then to maybe go off, find their own photographs. You can maybe do it in the classroom if they have a device in the classroom, get them to research something, and they can bring in their photographs as well to get even sort of more engagement, and they can justify why they like it, and then that can be even more discussion. Okay, and that's the great thing about the world today, isn't it? What's in the course books, what we do in the class, you can easily extend it and extrapolate it out into the real world. Okay, so let's move on. Here's another one. Work in pairs, discuss your opinion. So here's another one overtly asking for opinions of two adverts. Which do you think is the more clever, creative, clever, or original? This is another activity that I wrote for Language Hub. And what I'd like you to do just for a couple of minutes is just look at this whole activity and look at how we arrive at this question. It's not out of the blue. We build up to it. We scaffold up to it. Okay, so I'll just open the page and let you look at that just for a few seconds. Okay, so that's the spread in the book. And I'll just talk you through how we've approached the teaching of opinion language, or rather the providing the stimulus and providing the opportunity for the students to share their opinion. Firstly, I'm not sure whether you can see that. Work in pairs. What do you think makes a successful advert? So we're kind of setting the scene. Okay. And then if we quickly jump over to the other page. Sorry, my slides are a little bit slow. I'm not sure how slow they are. Yeah, we can see a vocabulary exercise. What makes a good advert? So we can then jump over the page, look at that to get some ideas to answer the speaking activity. And we've got some nice language: catch your eye, grab your attention, something you can connect with. It has a catchy slogan, and so on and so on. So we can give some language and some ideas to facilitate the discussion. Then look at the pictures of the two advertising campaigns. What is the product? How do you think the campaign works? So over to you, if you can just pop in the chat box. What do you think? There are two different ads there. What do you think is the product, and how do you think the ad works? I can't see the pic. Hope you can see enough of it. It's a Hoover. Yeah. Okay. What about the first one? What about the one too small? Can you zoom in? Ah, it's interesting. Yeah. Can you see the first one? What do you think's happening? A shoe. Shoes. Okay. Okay, yeah. You can't see the detail of the picture. But what in fact is happening in the first one, it's advertising for a pair of training shoes. I believe it's maybe Adidas. And it's in a shopping street, and they've got some timers, and then the members of the public can run. And if they run between 2 points quick enough, they open the box and they win a pair of trainers. Okay. Quite an interesting, inventive, creative kind of advertising. The second one, it looks like a Hoover, a big hoarding over a tunnel. And many people thought, I recognize that tunnel, and they went to look for it, but of course it didn't actually exist in the real world. It was just computer generated imagery pretending to be out there in the real world. So that itself created a bit of interest. Okay, so the students can speculate, then they listen to two people discussing the ads. Okay, and that gives them the answer. They can check their ideas. The listening exercise contains some opinion language, and then they can move on to the question that I showed you a few minutes ago. Discuss your opinion of the ads. Which do you think is the more creative, clever, or original? Okay, so we build up we build up to the actual exercise. It's not cold. They should be loaded with some vocabulary, some language, some opinions language, some ideas, and so on and so on. If we look in the bottom right, we've got the speaking hub. Okay, that is the kind of culmination of the spread, where the students design their own advertising campaign for some products, and the process of designing their campaign also should activate and require some opinion language. Okay, so that's sort of an example of how we've approached it in the book. So that leads on to the next section. What is the language of opinions? As I said at the beginning, we're going to look at the traditional. So if you are teaching, I'm sure you all do teach the language of opinion, what kind of phrases, what kind of opinion phrases do you tend to teach? If you opened up a course book, what language do you think you would see in the course book or the ground book? Let's give me, okay, I think, I suppose, in my opinion, in my view, I strongly believe, from my point of view, as I see it, etc., etc. Good. Okay. And what about the language for agreeing and disagreeing? What kind of language do we tend to teach to agree, to disagree with people? Okay. Okay, I fully agree. Absolutely, to my mind, and so on and so on. Okay, great. Good. The language you're putting there is kind of the language that we do tend to teach. Okay. And these phrases, like, in my opinion, as I see it, as far as I'm concerned, in my view, they're very useful. They're very useful in that they scaffold, they sort of frame, they present, they comment, if you like, on what comes next. You hear, in my opinion, you know someone's opinion's coming next. Okay. We do use them in everyday informal conversation. We also use them in more formal situations. But when you need to flag up, when you kind of need to make it clear, hey, my opinion is coming, etc., that's when these phrases are useful. Okay. Now, I Googled a couple of days ago, I Googled ELT language of opinion. This is the very first page that came up. Wow. Okay. There's a lot of language there. I don't know what your reaction to this is. There's a lot there, isn't there? And I took a second look. What does the web page say you do with this? And it doesn't. It's literally just, here is a list of opinions language, phrases for giving an opinion at elementary, pre-intermediate, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced level. There's no instruction of what to do with it. So I guess it's just there as a kind of stock of language for the person who visits the web page to do whatever they want to do with. I've no idea. As I said, there was no guidance. There was no suggestion. There's a lot of language there. Interesting how some language is divided by level. So, in my opinion, is elementary. As I see it, is upper intermediate. As far as I'm concerned, is advanced. I'm not sure why whether because as far as I'm concerned, is a bit more difficult to articulate, that's an advanced form. I don't know. We've also got a lot of these phrases like frankly, obviously, to be honest. So we've got to be honest down at pre-intermediate, obviously at intermediate, frankly at upper intermediate, and quite frankly at advanced. We need to be very careful of using these words. I teach things like quite frankly and frankly, it's a bit of can be a declaration of war used in the wrong context with the wrong intonation at the wrong time. If someone says frankly or quite frankly or obviously, it can be a little bit confrontational. So I would be careful of using some of these phrases. And the very last one, any idiot can see that. I mean, that's pretty confrontational, isn't it? So this page, there's kind of no guidance, no suggestions of how you use all this language. Okay, so anyway, I just thought I'd show you that because I was quite interested that was literally the very first page I came on, and it had this kind of wow effect on me. Okay, so let's move on. So what I've highlighted here are some of the ones that I just mentioned. And to me, these are the kind of, the author was having a bad day. I don't know, Courtney. These are some of the more neutral. I think these are the more familiar ones, aren't they? These are the ones that ELT tends to teach. They're more familiar, and I think they're pretty useful. And I teach these, which I'm going to come on to in a minute. They're quite kind of neutral. They're not loaded in the way of frankly or any idiot can see that or obviously. They're not sort of bordering on correcting a fact. They're still very much in opinion, the realm of opinion, rather than expressing correctness about a fact. Okay. And I did a little bit of a corpus research. Which of the 1, 2, 3, 4, which of the 4 phrases that I've highlighted in red, which do you think is the most frequently used? According to my brief corpus research, in my opinion, if you ask me, sounds a bit, if you ask me, could be confrontational, depending on context, depending on how you use it. Yes, so I did a little bit of corpus research. This is by no means thorough, but I think it's very usefully indicative. And in my opinion, is basically twice as frequent as far as I'm concerned, it's probably, just doing the quick maths, about 4 or 5 times as frequent as if you ask me, and it's about 20 times frequent as I see it. So according to the corpus, for every 20 examples of in my opinion, you might get 1 example of I see it, which I think is useful for us to know. So, you know, I think we can pass on to the students, say, yeah, of all these, in my opinion, is actually the most frequent, and therefore possibly the most useful. Okay. So anyway, there's a whole stuff there. As I said, it was just randomly the first page I looked at. Do with it what you will, but do be mindful of the way that it's laid out and what it's you know, claiming to be in terms of levels. So let's move on. This is kind of just to give a bit of backstory. I teach at the University of Oxford. I teach postgrads. They're sort of B2 plus on the whole, B2 right through to super advanced, I guess. And we do a class on opinions. It's a key thing of university life. I look at it from an academic context, a professional context, and an everyday context. And this is kind of what I do to get the ball rolling. I give them as sort of the classic, familiar ELT kind of opinion language stems and phrases. And I get them to fill the gaps. Okay, that's a kind of test, teach, test, if you like. You know, let's find out what they know. Ask them to add any more useful phrases that they know. Then we can add those and we can discuss those. Yes, talk about register, you know, the use of it. You know, as I said, it's there to sort of frame, clarify, flag up that your opinion is coming. Okay, so we can talk around those a little bit. Okay. Then, of course, they've filled the gaps. Okay. And again, the very familiar language that we've been speaking about. I need to maybe reassess as I see it. I would have guessed as I see it is more frequent than my corpus research said. So even just preparing this talk, I've kind of learned something. Maybe as I see it, I think it's the kind of thing that I might say, but maybe I'm a minority. Okay, so we establish the language, and then what we immediately need to do is look at the pronunciation, intonation, linking. So I think it's very important because these are kind of fixed expressions with a fixed intonation pattern. Look at the word stress, what's your opinion of? And of course, these pink ones here, which are the phrases for giving an opinion, the stress, of course, is on the word that refers to you. My, I'm, me, I, etc., etc. Yes, I think it's quite important to establish that, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned. If you ask me, as I see it, etc., etc. So let's get that established. Maybe some linking. As far as I'm, some nice consonant vowel linking, isn't there? As far as I'm. If you ask me, the nice liaison of the were, you ask me, and so on. So we do a little bit of work of just, you know, playing around with these, getting the students to articulate it. Okay. And then we can move on to some practice. Here's one from Language Hub. Focus on form. Yeah. Quite simply, some dialogues, putting in the key words, in my opinion, if you ask me, as far as I'm concerned. So that's kind of stage one of the practice. Here's another activity. This one we've got in Language Hub B1, looking at this all-important intonation, not just of the opinion phrases, but also the sort of the dialogue in general. Okay, to help the students build up a bit of a sense of rhythm with their, and then of course they can use that as a model for their discussions. Okay, and then moving outwards towards the personalization stage. I think, in my view, it seems to me personally, we add the information. So I'm going to say, I think Led Zeppelin is the greatest band of all time. What would you put in there? Quick comment in the box. Can you complete the first sentence with the name of a band, in your opinion? Queen, Italian food is the great. Okay, Queen. One Direction, yay. Botticelli Baby, I've never heard of that. Okay, good. We're getting a lot of Queen, a lot of Beatles, a bit of Black Sabbath. That's great. A bit of Megadeth, fantastic. Bit of Bee Gees. So we've a bit like when I last did this webinar. ABBA. Yes, I would totally agree with ABBA there. Okay. So of course, you fill in the sentences with your idea. You can then in A, B, read your sentence, agree, using the language. I think diddler, I agree completely. I see what you mean, but etc., etc. And then, of course, we can play around with it. We can always take stuff off the page in a course book. So the frame, I think, you can maybe change it. Maybe you can change pairs. Instead of I think Led Zeppelin is the greatest band of all time, as far as I'm concerned, Led Zeppelin is. In my opinion, Led Zeppelin is. If you ask me, Led Zeppelin is. So we can, again, we're focusing on form. It's a kind of drill. Yes, we're practicing the intonation and the pronunciation. But we can play around with, changing the stems of these sentences. Okay, so you can have a little bit of fun on that, and the students can then sort of even write their own sentences. Okay, here's something that I do at the university. As I said, I teach on a course called Foundations of Diplomacy, where the core context of the language, as well as academic, is diplomatic, international relations, current affairs, politics, etc. And here's a simple activity. Maybe you do it. I cut those into little pieces of paper in pairs, or maybe ideally in threes. They turn a piece of paper over. And again, it's kind of like a drill. How do you feel about Boris Johnson? As far as I'm concerned, he's blah, blah, blah. I couldn't agree more. And so on and so on. So you can have these little sort of three-way or two-way conversations. Take another card, and so on and so on. Again, it's kind of focusing on the form and practicing the form. It's a kind of drill, I guess. Okay. A variation on that. Get them into groups of 2 or 3. Give them 3 or 4 cards each. Give them a topic. You cut the papers yet. Give them a topic. During the course of that conversation, they need to use their expression. If they can slip it in as naturally as possible, when they've used all their 4, bingo, they're the winner. Change the cards, change the topics, and so on and so on. Again, it's the kind of activity that maybe you do. Nice and simple. We don't need any fancy equipment or anything. Yes? Okay. So that's the kind of thing that I do. Let's move on and look at the real language of opinions. So once we've established, or you've done your course book exercise, or you've established your class, your language, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, I couldn't agree more kind of language. What I then do is say, okay, that's great, that's good, but now we're going to add to that and look at some other language. So what do you think I might be referring to when I say the real language of opinions? What kind of language or what kind of techniques do you think we might now be going to look at? Any suggestions? Spoken, formal, okay, yeah. Everyday language, but can you give me some examples of swear words? Yeah. Can you think of any examples of the way that we most... Okay, let me rephrase that. This is her. Very good. In fact, her, was that Sarah? Her is the second most common way that we tend to agree with somebody. Actually, yeah. Gestures, exactly. Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. Yeah, sure. Really. May, of course. Yes. Although I'm still not quite sure how to use may. I used it the other day and I don't think I quite used it right. Okay. Okay, good. So let's look at some real language of opinions, or some more everyday, frequently used language of opinions than the classic traditional ELT language of opinions. I've just pressed the, there we go. Again, sorry, it's a little bit slow. Okay. Number 1, here are some Facebook social media dialogues, but it's the kind of thing that happens in conversation. 1-word answers. Exactly. True. Absolutely. And so on and so on. So I think it's very useful putting this out. As I said, it's simple language. The simple language is often the most natural and often the most useful. Okay, so one word answers. I mean, we can add things to this like sure, yeah, uh-huh. Okay, so this is one thing that I think we need to sort of just be aware of and introduce in the classroom. Our learners probably do it. It'll be the same in their L1, I'm sure. Okay, but something we can just sort of point out. Maybe have a quick look at the intonation and the pronunciation in the classroom. Okay. So what do you think, according to corpus research, according to analysis, according to academic linguistic research, are the most common way of agreeing and disagreeing? Any suggestions? Yes, yes and no, almost. I agree with you. That would be quite not so frequent, I imagine. Okay. You're kind of almost there, but you're missing a key word. We've got 11,500 people in the room. This is why my slide is maybe being a little bit slow. Okay. Sorry, the slides have really slowed down here. I don't know whether you can see it opening. There we go. Okay, phew, we got there. Okay, yeah and yeah but. Simple language, but research shows us, oh no, my slides just, okay, it's got a mind of its own. I suspect it's because there are so many people here. Yeah and yeah but are the two most common ways of agreeing and disagreeing. Yeah and yeah, I acknowledge you, and I'll add some additional information which has a socio-linguistic function of making the connection, developing the conversation. Yeah, but, yeah, I respectfully acknowledge your opinion, but I kind of disagree. It's not yes and, it literally is yeah and. So again, we can get the students, yeah and, yeah, but. Yeah, but imagine you want to make a frog sound. Yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. That's kind of what it is. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the next slide. Again, a couple more social media exchanges. This was with a Russian friend of mine. Nice, wintry, I said. Yeah, not that cold. Yeah, this classic, yes, I agree. Adding some more information because that's how communication works. Those that learn your preferences are pretty cool. Yeah, but a bit scary too. These are these things like Spotify and these apps that learn your musical slide, your musical preferences. And it's a kind of, if you like that band, you'll probably like this band. They're pretty cool. Yeah, but a bit scary too. Yeah, but, you know. And this dialogue extract here is from the listening exercise that we looked at earlier about the ads from the Language Hub book. And I wanted to put in some of this real language. It would have been very easy to fill it with the classic, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, as I see it. It wouldn't have made for a natural dialogue. Yeah, and yeah, but I wanted to get that in, and the opinions language box has yeah and yeah but in the box as a bit of real useful language. Okay, so I'm moving on to another slide. It's jumping ahead. What's going on? My hands are here. Okay, I'm going to try and find, I'm going to go back to a slide. Okay, good. Sorry. The slides seem to be jumping around quite a lot. I do apologize. So how can we practice this yeah, but and no, but? Okay, as an example, or the yeah and. Simple little exercise, and this is what I do in the classroom. Useful language, yeah, but it's a bit random. Nice students, yeah, but they're a bit quiet. It's not ideal, no, but it could be worse. I don't want to go, no, but we gotta. Okay, that's the kind of exercise that I do in the classroom to get the ball rolling. It kind of drill, okay, yep. So you can get the students to do that kind of thing, to practice yeah, but and no, but. What we tend to do is, if the original sentence is grammatically negative, it's not ideal. I don't want to go, we can then respond with either yeah, but or no, but. Okay. It's not ideal. Yeah, but it could be worse. It's not ideal. No, but it could be worse. Both are fine. You could really explore that and look at the differences of that, but I don't think we need to. Okay. Yeah. So that's a nice way of practicing the yeah, but. So I'm going to press this button once and hopefully it'll only move one slide. Let's see. Excellent. Okay. So we've looked at agreement by additional point. Yeah, and. Let's look at somebody says, what's the meaning of a bit random? Well, you know, it was just an example, not a bit random. I think a bit random means a bit random, you know, not organized, not focused, not for a reason. Okay. Agreement by additional point. Can you think of any other strategies? So if we call agreement by additional point a kind of device, a technique, a strategy, can you think of any other similar ways that we use to agree? I'm going to give you a list in a moment of 3 or 4 or 5 that you saw a few moments ago, actually, when the screen jumped forward. Okay. Okay. Reiteration. Yes. Okay. A more extreme adjective, Heather Burton. Yes. Agreement by synonym. And it usually is a more extreme adjective. Exactly. Okay. So here are some more techniques. So this is kind of the things that we can look at. Agreement by additional point. Yeah, and agreement by exemplifying. Agreement by giving an example. Generalizing. We tend to agree by generalizing. Agreement by synonym that one of you just mentioned. Repeating the intensifier, the auxiliary, and echoing. So what we can do is teach language like this. I'll just let you look at that for a few seconds. And there was a comment there about somebody doesn't use this language, therefore they wouldn't teach it. Irrespective of how common it is, that's absolutely fine. This language, a lot of this research is based on recordings of business meetings. In the good old days when you could actually record someone's business meeting and analyze it, of course, because of sensitivity and confidentiality, we can't really do that so much these days. But a lot of this language is not just the everyday street language. A lot of this is actually the language that professionals use it in professional context. Okay, so we've got these little techniques. Exemplifying, the exam was tough, yeah, especially paper 3. Generalizing, he's been a real pain, yeah, he usually is. It was great, wasn't it? Brilliant, I thought. And as somebody mentioned, when we use a synonym, we often use a stronger synonym. Okay, or maybe one of equal strength, but that's another. So this is some very, very, very simple language, very real language. Okay, of course, if we have agreement by these, then again, we have disagreement by the opposites, disagreement by additional point. So instead of agreement by specifying, exemplifying, we have disagreement by stating an exception. Instead of having agreement by generalizing, we tend to disagree by mitigating. Instead of agreeing by synonym, we tend to disagree by antonym. For example, yeah, I'll let you just look at those. Yeah, but not yet. Well, except paper 3. He's being a real pain. That's not like him. It was great, wasn't it? Terrible, I thought. And so on, and so on, and so on. Okay, simple, simple language, but it's the kind of language that we tend to use a lot more frequently than the classics. I see what you mean, but I agree with you up to a point, but I couldn't agree more. This is the kind of everyday little language that we all use, or maybe not we all use, someone there says they don't use it, but the language that a lot of us use and don't really notice, perhaps. Okay, so once we've established this language, and what I'm doing now, I'm kind of running through one of my classes, you know, essentially the kind of thing that we do in the class. We need to do some practice. So first we can practice on the form. Agreement by exemplifying. Yeah, especially paper 3. Yeah, especially the last couple of days. The lecture is really good. It usually is. Great music they're playing. Yeah, it's always pretty good here. Okay, over to you. Look at the agreement by synonym. Can you just stick in the chat box what you, okay, you're now your students doing this little exercise. What words would you stick in the chat box to answer? Awful. Well, that was rubbish. Awful, wasn't it? Terrible, wasn't it? Horrible, wasn't it? Exactly. And immediately we've got some nice lexis appearing in the classroom. So for those of you who like going down tangents in your lessons, you can go down a big lexical vocabulary synonym tangent. Okay. Piotr, yeah, I guess you didn't mean to spell it like that, or maybe you did, I don't know. Okay. What about the bottom 2? Look, we'd really better get going if we're going to miss this traffic. Yeah, we need to. The problem is he worries all the time. Yeah, he's always about something. What? We need to rush? Yes, possibly we need to hurry. We need to hustle. I think hustle has a kind of different meaning. Someone, I saw skates. I didn't see the full sentence because they're moving too quickly. Get a move on. Yes. Okay. And what about the last one? Anxious. The problem is he's worrying all the time. Yeah, he's always anxious. Somebody said fretty. I like fretty. I don't think I've ever heard the word fretty before, Aisa. Excellent. In a tiz. He's always in a tiz about something. Exactly. Okay. I've just pressed the slide to move on. So for example, okay. And if we go down to the bottom, yeah, we need to get a move on. Now you could explore all kinds of useful phrases. Get a move on, get our skates on, make a move, stop dawdling, etc., etc. You can really kind of roll with this and do a lot of creative. I believe it's what, you know, some people might call the lexical approach, just providing, exploring, taking on useful phrases and expressions. Okay, he's always fretting about something, in a tiz, yes, worrying, and so on and so on. Okay, so as well as actually focusing on the opinion strategy, the opinion device, it can be very, very generative as well in terms of exploring the language and so on and so on and so on. We can learn a lot of vocabulary as well. Okay, and some nice phrases. So that's the kind of more form focus. And then similar to the Yebut one, we can do it for these other devices. So what I'm going to do just for the last 5 minutes or so is just look through a similar thing, but for some of these agreeing and disagreeing devices. Great film that. Yeah, especially the ending. I love Led Zepp. Yeah, especially their earlier stuff. Nice place, huh? Yeah, especially the view. Social media. Ah, yeah, especially all those experts. Okay. Mainly, yes, it doesn't have to be especially. Yeah, especially is, according to research in the corpus, the most common phrase. But yeah, mainly we could use an alter. Yeah, mainly. Yeah, particularly. But particularly is a bit of a mouthful, so we kind of tend to avoid it unless we have to. Okay. Simple little activity. But you can have fun with it. You can get the students walking around the class, reading their sentences to each other. Yeah, focusing on the intonation, the Yebut, the yeah especially, and so on. Okay, so that's one example. I've got a worksheet of this. They do it, they then interact, they then swap pairs, and so on and so on. Okay, and a good activity to learn colloquial language. Exactly. This one, agreeing by generalizing. As I said, I teach sort of diplomatic, international relations, politics, language, business English. This one is more on a business English context. The one before about Led Zeppelin and so on was more everyday. So you can vary the context according to your teaching situation. Yeah, yeah, they always are. Anyone like to jot down any of the answers to this? They can't reach a final decision. It rarely is for the third one. They never do, or they never can. I never can, Courtney, yes. Who? Yeah, no one ever can. They never can. Germany would be better than the UK. Anywhere would be better. or anywhere better than UK, or anywhere would, depending on how much ellipsis. So again, there's lots of sort of stuff to discuss and play around with. And of course, the intonation is key as well. So it's a very, very simple little exercise, but very generative. And I think somebody put a comment that you're giving them some good colloquial language as well. I'm just moving on one more slide. Yeah, and if you look at this slide, I've deliberately avoided the classic ELT artificial. That was a useful lecture, wasn't it? That was a great film. I have to say that was not their best. I've deliberately framed it with some kind of more colloquial, spoken, natural grammar. Yeah, so we've got that as an input as well. Useful lecture, no? Excellent, I thought. So what we're doing, we're helping the students to develop some quite natural, realistic, useful, but relatively simple language. Until he die, I'd say. Exactly. And somebody's put, Patricia, you've put I'd say. So the first one put excellent, I thought. We could have I'd say. Excellent, I'd say. Excellent, if you ask me. Yeah, so there's all sorts of little phrases that we can put around this to frame the actual synonym or antonym. Okay, great film that. Dreadful, I thought. Not their best, I have to say. Yeah, pretty good, I thought. And so on and so on and so on. Yeah, and then of course, for this one and for all of them, you can then extend the exercise. So you remove the cue. Okay, you remove the cue. So then they, once they're on a roll, once they're in the zone, the students can choose their own synonyms or antonyms or additional information or generalizations, etc., etc., etc. Okay. There's all kinds of things. We can all do things with cutting up pieces of card where you've got the phrases, yeah, especially, yeah, but no, but, turn it over, respond using that. There's all kinds of things that we can do. Okay. So I'm now going to move to the last slide, I believe. And this is something you could do to put it all together. Useful webinar. Yeah, especially the beginning. Terrible, I thought. Yeah, but yeah. So, you know, great film, etc. You can get them to do this. Just again, this is a bit more of a focus on form as well. Okay. So I've kind of come to the end. Just to recap, you know, we looked at a few, we thought a little bit about activities to activate opinions. I'm sure you've all got your own tried and tested activities. We looked at the traditional classic language. There is definitely a place for that. These phrases flag up, we're giving an opinion. So if you really need to flag it up, there's a place for that. And then what we've looked at as kind of my main focus, you know, these little devices that we tend to use quite a lot, that perhaps we don't really notice. And I don't think ELT World teaches. I'm sure some of you do teach some of this language, but you know, it's I think it's very useful for the learners. So I think we now have about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, I'm sure Jagosh has been compiling some questions for me. I'm just going to move on to the next slide and say to you people, please get in touch with me if you have any questions, comments. The slide is opening, I believe. Yeah. I have a Jon Hird ELT Facebook page where you can find out other things. You can get hold of me. And here's my email address, john.hird@conted.ox.ac.uk. That's an email that comes directly to me. So please, any questions, comments or anything, it'd be great to hear from you. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was useful. I hope you've got something to take away and incorporate into your existing repertoire. And thank you very much.